In the previous lesson in the series, we ended with the puzzle of how complex cells formed. They had bacterial ancestors, but what was the nature of the transformation into a larger, more complex cell? In this lesson, we'll look at two of the features of the complex cells, the fact that they have mitochondria and their large size. So did the mitochondria evolve as an adaptation like other cell traits? Did cells start making their own mitochondria at some point in time? And why did bacteria remain small? What allowed the complex cells to get large? A closer inspection of mitochondria provides tantalizing clues. Here are three of them. Mitochondria are the size of bacteria. Mitochondria have their own circular DNA like bacteria, and mitochondria reproduce within the cell like bacteria. So, taking size first, if this is our complex cells, clearly mitochondria must be smaller than the complex cell for it to exist inside the complex cell. Turns out their size is very similar to bacteria. And just as the complex cell has lots of DNA in the nucleus, mitochondria also have their own circular piece of DNA, just like bacteria. And interestingly, mitochondria are not constructed by the cell's machinery. Rather, mitochondria divide. They grow larger and then split into two mitochondria, just the way bacteria reproduce. So that raises an amazing possibility. Could mitochondria be the descendants of bacteria? If so, how in the world did it get inside a larger cell? That has come to be known as the Endosymbiosis Theory. Here we have a timeline, a history of Earth. Some 4 billion years ago, somewhere on planet Earth, life emerged. Now scientists still debate exactly the conditions for the formation of the first living cells. But here in this picture, we'll take up the hypothesis that it occurred underneath the oceans at these certain hydrothermal vents. And here we see some simple type of bacteria cells emerging from these vents. So this would have been the origin of life, the first cells on Earth. Now, because they can reproduce and evolve, they're going to be changing over time. So new types of bacteria will be produced over time. So in a couple 100 million years, you're going to have lots of different kinds of bacteria, some of which invented the capacity for photosynthesis. But here we're going to focus on these two types of bacteria, one a little bit larger than the other, but they both sort of eat nutrients in their environment. Now, the endosymbiosis theory suggests that two separate bacteria cells merged to form one more complex cell. And that's called endosymbiosis. These two different types of bacteria merged. Now, the smaller red one is shown inside the larger one here, and the idea is that it did not get destroyed. So it wasn't digested. It was able to survive inside the larger cell. This is called endosymbiosis because symbiosis refers to the fact that two species living in close association, and the endo part meaning inside or within. So we have two species of bacteria merging to form one more complicated organism, but one of them is inside the other. So this endosymbiosis event would have been the origin of mitochondria. So mitochondria today have the size of bacteria, DNA like bacteria, reproduce like bacteria, because they were once free-living bacteria. It's just that some of those bacteria got themselves inside a larger cell, but were not destroyed. And so the two cells then formed a kind of an alliance, and it was a very successful alliance because it led to the origin of more complex cells, which then later would lead to multi-celled life that we're familiar with. And we can think of sort of the Earth in two phases, sort of the pre-endosymbiosis phase, where it was just bacteria evolving. Well, they were experimenting with biochemistry to live in different environments. A very successful type of living organism, the bacteria are. After endosymbiosis, because this step is going to be the first step in the emergence of large complex cells, well, it's the complex cells that are going to experiment with size and complexity to live in different environments. So we've got sort of two phases, the pre-endosymbiosis, where bacteria are evolving all kinds of different metabolisms to eat different things and survive in different places. And then this endosymbiosis event allows a whole new possibility for life on Earth. Large, complex cells, and ultimately, later on, multi-celled life. So, complex cells arose just once in the long history of cellular life on Earth. The event involved the merger of two separate species of bacteria, thus forming a larger and more complex cell. Specifically, scientists think that a larger bacteria cell incorporated a smaller bacteria cell and did not digest it. The arrangement was mutually beneficial. The smaller bacteria cell continued to produce ATP energy molecules for itself, but some leaked out to the larger cell. The larger cell therefore benefited from its new inhabitant. In return, the smaller cell got a steady supply of nutrients and protection within the membrane boundary of the larger cell. As the smaller bacteria cell reproduced, the total energy production of the newcomers increased. The larger cell now had much more energy to support new evolutionary possibilities. The smaller bacteria cell that entered the host was the ancestor of what we call mitochondria today. In other words, the mitochondria that exist in all complex cells are descendants of once free-living bacteria cells. That rare symbiotic event produced the common ancestor of all organisms that are composed of complex cells. For example, paramecia, amoeba, euglena, plants, animals, fungi. That is everything except bacteria. Now, let's tackle the other feature of complex cells, their size. Now, bacteria have been evolving on Earth for 4 billion years, but don't show any of the characteristics of large complex cells. They remain small and simple cells. Why are there no bacteria the size of paramecia or amoeba? Why is this? Why are the bacteria so small? Well, scientists think that a main reason is an energy problem. You'll recall that we looked at some geometry of cells. We've got the surface area of the cell, its membrane. In the membrane are proteins that may be related to energy production. And then there's the volume of the cell. Well, as a cell grows larger, the surface area will get larger, but the volume will get larger faster. So the surface area is 4 pi r squared, and the volume 4/3 pi r cubed. Notice the cube here means that the volume is going to be growing faster than the surface area. And this means then there's going to be an energy limitation in larger size. So bacteria just cannot grow that big, or they face an energy deficit. They face an energy limitation. Well, endosymbiosis solved that problem, because now what has happened is inside the larger cell are a whole bunch of these little bacteria that are producing all kinds of energy. So now, because these things can reproduce, the larger cell has a lot more energy. It's got these little energy factories incorporated within its interior. So the more energy to support a more active lifestyle and larger size. So the endosymbiosis event helped living things get big on planet Earth. Not just the cells could get big, but then the cells are going to be able to stick together to form multi-celled organisms as well. So again, the story looks like this. We have the origin of life a long time ago, and at some point, perhaps around 2 billion years ago, it's not clear exactly when, but at some point, two species of bacteria merged. This was endosymbiosis, and it was a rare event, happened just once. This was the origin of mitochondria, and it solved an energy problem. So prior to endosymbiosis, bacteria can't get big because they can't make enough energy. As they grow, they start facing an energy limitation. So in a sense, endosymbiosis was a way to jump an energy barrier. Now cells could get big because within the larger cell you had multiple mitochondria. This then allowed for the evolution of larger size. Cells could evolve to be bigger. And with abundant energy from mitochondria, cells could evolve more active lifestyles like hunting. So the type of lifestyle like amoeba, where you're crawling around and engulfing your prey, that requires lots of energy. It would have been impossible prior to endosymbiosis. And so we can think of mitochondria as little batteries powering ever more energy-expensive evolutionary possibilities. And again, what's the evidence for this? Well, the mitochondria today, in all of these complex cells, mitochondria are the size of bacteria, have circular DNA like bacteria, and reproduce, suggesting that they were once free-living bacteria.